Good morning. Today is Gimel Adar, and it's the 24th of February. And we're continuing with our mimer on how is Amalek different than all the other psychological problems that we have. We're on page 83. So what we said so far is that the 7 Canaanite nations, they represent the character traits of the animal soul, but these character traits are from Dat and below, meaning their loving kindness, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzachot, Yesod, Malchut of Nefesh Behemis. But the husk of Amalek, the klipa of Amalek, Ubchinat klipa shkeneged adat kedusha, it covers up and conceals the das of holiness, the knowledge, the consciousness, the concentration, all those things that we talked about yesterday. What connects. And now he's going to say, and we know that dat means to connect, to strongly be connected as in marital relations. And that is how the Torah uses it in the verse, and Adam knew his wife Eve. Uvekdusha yeshtei b'chinot dat elyon v'dat tachton. And in general, when we talk about the holiness side of life, there are two aspects of dat. Kel de'ot Hashem, right? God is a God of two knowledges, two forms of knowledge. And the one is the higher, and the one is the lower. Dat elyon hu shemkasher b'chinat chokhmah v'bina. So dat elyon here it's not like Yichud Ha'ila, Yichud Ha'tata. It's different. Even though it does work the same way. So Dat Elyon is a connection between Chokhmah and Bina, between wisdom and understanding, in the Moichin, in the intellect. So that's like the Yud Kei. And something has to connect them. And then that Tachton, as we'll see, is between the Mochin and the Midot. I'm saying it now because otherwise we have to wait a long time until he says it. So Dat Elyon, Dat Tachton are the Yud Kei and Vav Kei, because Yud Kei is between Chokhmah and Bina. Yud is Chokhmah and He is Bina, and Vav Kei is between. Here it'll be like the Vav is the emotions, but here we're not looking at the emotions themselves. We're saying that this is what brings down from the intellect. It's like the Vav here like represents the throat. So it brings down into the emotions, which here will be like the Hey. It's not chalak, it's not glat, the way you explain it this way, but it's as close as you can come to Yichud Ha'ila, Yichud Ha'tata when you talk about this meaning. But really the simple meaning in Kabbalah used to be that the Dat Tachton, the lower Dat, connects between the intellect and the emotions. הנה ידוע דחוכמה הוא בחינת ברק המבריק שלא בא לידי השגה והבנה עדיין, והנה הוא בחינת השגה והבנה באורך וארוך. So it says, when you talk about wisdom is the beginning of the intellect, like a lightning strike. But because it's lightning, it appears in a flash and it's gone. So it hasn't come into hasaga. Hasaga is grasping, and havana is understanding or contemplation. And Bina is exactly the grasping. It's even called koach hatfisa, the power of grasping something. And even the mashal in Chasidut many places is, it's like shooting an arrow and being able to grab it. So the shooting the arrow, that's the wisdom. And being able to grab it in midair, that's Bina. And it develops it be'orach ve'rochav, in length and in width. וכדי שבחינה ברק המבריק דחוכמה יבוא לידי השגה והבנה בבחינת בינה או לידי הדעת, שהוא העמקת הדעת וההתקשרות בעצם המושכל, עד שמבינו היטב על בוריו. It says for this lightning strike of wisdom to be captured by Bina, Dat does that. And that is the depth. Ha'amakat, deepening the knowledge, the consciousness, ve'hitkashrut be'etzem muskan, connecting to the very substance of what's being contemplated. Ad shemvimno hitev al burio. And so basically it's the Bina that grasps it, But that afterwards has to act to make sure that you don't lose the point. That's why it's called concentration. Losing the point means losing the connection to wisdom. So a person can contemplate for a long time, and he doesn't remember what was the point of the whole contemplation. So to remember what was the point, to keep it in his mind, to keep it conscious. So again, when I start contemplating a topic, I expand and expand and expand, and I add more information to it and so on. I can lose the whole purpose of the contemplation, not remember what the original lightning strike was. So that keeps that intact. It helps me concentrate in that sense. Until you get good bina, until you get good understanding in the topic. As explained elsewhere, and where it's explained the most is Shar Yichud from the Midler Rebbe. והנה מעצם ההתבוננות שבמוח נולדים מבחינת מידות שבמוחין ובבחינת זת תבונה שהם התפעלות המידות שבמוח בבחינת אהבה ויראה. So by contemplating in the mind, just by contemplating, you already have emotions. These are not emotions that are felt. These are emotions that are experienced in the mind. They're intellectual emotions. And they're called the 7 lower sfirot of tevuna. There's bina and there's tvuna. We talked about this once. There's 1 bina and 3 tvunot. It's something that the Arizal builds into. It's a whole chapter in Eitz Chaim to explain this. And he says that bina itself is divided into 2 partzufim, into 2 personas. There's ima and there's tvuna. Ima is the mother, and tvuna we usually translate it as some kind of contemplation application. It's hard to translate it, but what? Comprehension. Any other synonym you want, but the point is that tvuna is already applied, that it's already moving towards taking the intellect and manifesting it as something. It could be many things. In this case, what he says is that the 7, he doesn't here differentiate between the 3 different types of tvuna, which is tvuna in general. And then it's called Yisrael Saba v'Tvuna. Just as there is Abba and Ima, there's Yisrael Saba and Tvuna. And they're considered the more applicative, the more manifestable aspect of Abba and Ima, of wisdom and understanding. So the 7 lower sfirot of Tevuna are still in the intellect. They're not outside the intellect yet. They're not emotions yet. But they're called in Chasidus midot shebamuchin, the character traits in the mind. They're not yet affecting how the person acts, certainly, and not even how he feels. And so when this awakens, so when they awaken these mindful emotions, these mindful character traits, they immediately push towards being experienced in the heart. So a person who feels something in his mind, we have to find an example of this. What is this like? So when we learn, so let's say you learn about marital relations, and you come and you say, I really should treat my wife this way. So as you're learning, what you're developing is the midos within Tvuna. Because you imagine, so what's this situation going to be like? How should I act? Like the first thing that I teach is that if you're having an argument, so it's your fault. And then I convince someone that it's true, that it's their fault. Doesn't matter if it's not, or if it is or isn't, but the only thing you can control is if it's your fault. If it's someone else's fault, you have no control over it, and you become what we call a victim. And you don't want to be a victim, especially not in your house. So you have to take the initiative. How can you take the initiative? If you understand that there's something wrong with you, and that you can fix. But if there's something wrong with the other side, then how can you going to fix it? You can't do very much. Not to mention the fact that it's also true, especially if you're a man, that if you're having an argument with your wife, it's your fault, it's not her fault. How exactly to end it, those are different questions. And once you have the argument already, So the first step is, I'm sorry. Why am I sorry? Because it's my fault. I can fix it now. How can I fix it? First of all, to admit that it's my problem. Anyway, so the person hears this, and let's say he's convinced, and he already feels how much more love he'd have towards his wife if he didn't see her guilty of everything. And he'd be able to see that it's he himself and not her. And she's only reflecting his bad qualities, whatever they are. She's picking up on them and showing him that these are what he has. So he's moved already, but it's not yet emotions. It's not character yet because he hasn't been in the situation. But right away he says, "I want to go home and practice this. I want to see how this works." Right. So that he already has the character within the tvuna, within the lower part of understanding. He's already ready to come out. And this is, he says, וכנראה בחוש, שכשמתעורר במוחו באיזו התפעלות שכלית כמו אהבה, נתעורר בלב גם כן בהלם התפעלות לדבר ראו, וזהו משיכת הלב אחרי המידות שבמוח. So it says right away, when the character in the mind, the emotions in the mind awaken, the heart also awakens and it wants to follow what the mind just said. And it's waiting for the opportunity. ולפעמים יש עניין משיכת הלב, מה שהלב מרגיש ונמשך אחרי איזה דבר. ויש לומר שהוא למעלה מהמוחים. So sometimes the heart awakens by itself, without contemplation before. It says, what is that? It says, there the heart is being moved by something even higher than the mind. What's higher than the mind? The will, or the pleasure, or emunah. Everything that's in the crown is higher than the mind. וכאן הכוונה מה שהלב נמשך אחר המידות שבמוחים ונמשך מבחינת דעת המתפשט. But here we're talking about how the emotional character traits are drawn after the mind, and that is called the extending da'at, the extending knowledge. Why is it extending? Because it's drawing it down from the intellect down into the heart, and it's being able to pass through the throat, as it were. אך העיקר הוא בעבודה שיוולד בלב, מבחינת התפעלות המידות במורגש, והאווירה בהתפעלות במורגש. But the main thing is not to leave it intellectual. You have to make it become something emotional. You have to actually feel it. It has to become a character trait. So you can't leave it theoretically only in the mind. And that's the main thing we need to do. That's called da'at mitpashet. That's extending or drawing down knowledge. ועל ידי זה בא אחר כך לקיום המצוות בסור מרע ועשה טוב בפועל ממש. And only when it becomes character traits below, in the heart, only then can it turn into the commitment to keep mitzvot.
What's this word?
אהבה ויראה. וכמו על דרך משל בגשמיות. Now he's going to give us, like we said, the Rebbe Rashab always tries to give a psychological parable and a scientific parable. So let's see here his physical scientific parable. He says, it was accepted in the early medicine that the heart is the intermediate between the mind and all the other organs in the body, all the other parts of the body. What do we mean? We've seen this many times in Torah or in the Kudei Torah, that the beginning of the revelation of the soul in the body is through the brain, through the mind. And from there, it goes down into the heart, and from there, it expands to the rest of the body. So the life force goes from the brain to the heart, down to all the other organs of the body. כמו הדרך משל בגשמות, הנה הלב הוא הממוצע בין המוח לשערי האווירים, וכידוע, עיקר השראת החיות הוא במוח שבראש, כדי שימשך מן המוח החיות להחיות האווירים הגשמיים הוא על ידי הלב, שמהמוח נמשך רוח חיים בחלל הימני שבלב, הוא מתפשט באדם שבחלל השמאלי, והוא עניין התחברות רוח ונפש, דחר ונוקבה, כמו שמבואר בזוהר דסה במשפטים, ומשם נמשך אדם בכל האיברים, שהוא העיקר, החיות, המחיה את האיברים. Okay, so we just repeated what we just said. והממוצע הוא הלב. So the heart is the intermediary. ובלי זה אי אפשר שיומשך החיות מן המוח לאיברים. And without it, the life force cannot come down from the brain to all the other organs. ולכן כשיקרא חס וחלילה איזה קלקול בהלב, רחמנא ליצלן, אין החיות מתפשט כל כך באיברים. And therefore he says, if there's something wrong with the heart, so the life force does not extend well into the other organs. Again, this is like a type of it's almost a sympathetic medicine. It's not, or anatomy. It's not the way we see anatomy today. It's a different picture altogether. In any case, that's what it looked like. And he uses this as an example. And likewise, we can understand in our divine service, in the soul, in the psyche, that equivalent to the organs of the body and the sinews of the body, we have the prescriptive commandments and the prohibitive commandments. How does this work? וכדי שיהיה החיות באיברים דמעשה המצוות, הוא על ידי בחינת אהבה ויראה דאהבה, הוא מקור רמ"ח מצוות תעשה, ויראה מקור לשסה מצוות לא תעשה. So he says the same thing happens. If you want to have life, if you want to feel alive when you perform a mitzvah, it has to pass through the heart. What does the heart give? The heart gives love and fear. Love for an affinity for the positive prescriptive mitzvot, and fear of disconnecting and therefore not wanting to transgress, giving life to all the prohibitive mitzvot. Okay, so we have the same structure. The idea is that it's the same structure. You have the mind, you have the heart, and you have the actions. So if the actions are the mitzvot, so the mind, which is the source of the life force, has to, it's not enough that it says, go do a mitzvah, meaning, okay, pray now. Just pray. It's a technical thing. No, it has to go through the heart. If it doesn't go through the heart, there's no soul to what you're doing. And again, this heart, as we said, is the seat of the passion. So that everything that I do passionately. וכמו שכתוב בספרן של בינונים, פרק ד', as it says in the 4th chapter of the Tanya, מצוות עשהו על ידי אהבה, דווקא מפני שהוא אוהב את השם וחפש את דבקה בו, ואי אפשר לדבק באור אינסוף, כי אם על ידי המצוות. So it says that in order to cling to the infinite, I can only do that through performing mitzvot. ויש לומר שהם בחינת המשכות אור אינסוף. And really what is happening here, that each one of the mitzvot is like bringing down the light of the infinite. We talked about this. When you do something infinitely, when you go beyond what we call the light that fills all worlds, and we're going to the infinite light, which is certainly light that surrounds all worlds. So there everybody is equal, everybody is the same. But what you get from it is a personal passion. And it's something that we didn't talk about this week, but in the Parsha, there's this whole idea that the Adanim, the bases of the walls of the tabernacle, were made out of the silver that was brought for machatzit shekel, for half of coin for each person. Nobody brought anything different. So why is that? So the Rebbe says, because the basis of all spirituality in the end is the same for everyone. The mitzvot. That's it. You have to have that. If you don't have that, then all the spirituality you call spirituality is not really what it seems to be. Okay, so let's end here.
But you're painting a picture that Amalek was created with his bad nature, so what's his fault then if he does surveyors?
Who said it's his fault?
You want to kill him because he's such bad nature.
Said him, eradicate him.
Why did Hashem create him in the first place?
What do you mean? He didn't create him in the first place.
Who did?
We said it's because I don't have enough concentration. I lose my concentration, and it turns against me. When somebody loses their concentration, it's not just that now they don't have concentration. That's bad enough. But now they train their da'at to constantly conceal what they're trying to do. Slowly it breaks them down totally. It's not. Again, in the psychological and spiritual elements of the world, if you're not moving forward, you're going backwards. Right? It's not true about the physical world. It's simply not true. If somebody says you're not going forward, you're going backwards, it's not true in the physical world. You're not going backwards. But in the spiritual world, in the psyche, it definitely is. The moment that you stop moving forward is the moment that you start going backwards. So good Shabbos, and we'll meet again next week.